For Magic players trying to get bang for their buck in a world of reprints from Wizards of the Coast, there is a card type that holds up better than all others even when it gets reprinted, and that's why that card type is worth buying. Over the years, the one thing I've noticed is that players don't replace their land. They accumulate mana types and different specialty lands, but they generally hold on to them for the long term. Welcome back everyone, MTG Moxman here, and thanks again for hanging out with me on the channel today. It is a very fascinating time in Magic when you get to see, over the last couple of years, the sheer magnitude of specialty lands that Wizards of the Coast has given us as players. Now, not all these lands have to be expensive to be utilized and be amazing pieces to any of your decks you want to construct, but I've noticed that these lands do hold value longer than most of the other cards that are out there. While other cards dwindle on the vine as sets rotate in and out, even if a land gets reprinted, it still gets utilized, bought. Even when it drops down to $1 a land, players just buy more of them, meaning it still has value to players building with those decks. And the power creep on land, although it does happen, it's not as fast as we've seen for creature types, enchantments, and the like. So take a look at a few of these lands here. Let's take a look here. Here is Otawara, the Soaring City. Now, when you look at this land, I chose this particular one because the chances of this getting reprinted is few and far between. Maybe the land will come back at some future time, but this particular type will hold a little more value. And it's not that expensive. You can get that for under 20 bucks still. Now, the foil full art extended version will cost you more, but the basic one there for 20 bucks, that seems like a really good deal for a card that can be defensive, offensive, and still taps for land. But it doesn't always have to be that way. When you guys saw the Lord of the Rings reprint, now this of course is Yavimaya Cradle of Growth. It came from Modern Horizons 2. It's part of a land cycle that I hope one day they complete. I'm hoping Modern Horizons 3 has it in there, because it'll really kind of key into some stuff that I think has been happening behind the scenes. But when I look at Fangorn Forest there, it's that version I'm talking about. Yavimaya Cradle of Growth, the basic version, is only like an $8 to $10 card. This one's around $18 US to buy that card. But its chances of coming around are a little bit more slim. It has a little bit of clout and a little bit more desirability for players who want to get their hands on this stuff. Keep these things in mind because they are beautiful to look at. They're great utilitarian cards, and they're not really going to sink in value as fast as players believe they will. But it doesn't have to end there. Even the Seat of the Empire, remember this thing was $1. And then it started creeping up because the fact attacking or blocking creatures, you can just get rid of it and deal 4 damage. It gets cheaper the more legendary creatures you have come out. This became a highly utilized card right now. And after it rotates out, do you think Wizards is just going to reprint it instantly? Or is it going to take years? Which means you get to enjoy the card. It's under $7, $8 right now to buy this card. Yes, this version here I think is 12 bucks, but it's available. It's cheap compared to how we've usually seen these types of lands before. And there's always a chance that after this goes out of print, after everything moves on the next couple of years, and again, Wizards could leave this sitting on the shelf for a decade. I'm not saying they will. Under no circumstance take this stuff as like, Moxman said. No. We have no idea with the reprint schedule they're keeping how it's going to go. But even if they reprinted it, this card would still be sought after. It'll still be desired by players. Now, how about Hall of the Storm Giants? Now, this was from Dungeons & Dragons Forgotten Realms. These man lands, the lands that come to life and start beating you down, are becoming a more commonplace phenomenon. This is still one of the strongest ones, assuming you have the mana base to get this thing activated. It has ward, it hits for 6. This thing's a beast when it gets on the battlefield. I used it all the time when D&D was rotated into Standard. I used this thing constantly on Arena, doing massive board wipes that allowed me to just pummel people with my lands. And now, we even have a greater variety because of what we've seen in the Lost Caverns of Ixalan and from WoW. Now, the last one here. Bozuju Who Endures, the land I thought was going to get banned, but instead seems to hold up very well and has decent value. Guys, lands like these that do multiple effects, Wizards, if you've noticed, since Kamigawa, the lands, they're kind of cycling down a bit. I'm not saying they're not desirable, but they just don't seem as powerful as the ones we've seen after that point. So when you look at things like Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, you look at the lands they offered, even Taknuma, The Abandoned Mire. I didn't put in the video. I didn't put a few of the other ones like Pathways or Triomes. You guys know about the lands that are out there. But these lands do not get devalued the same way. They do not depreciate the same way. Players stopped opening these boxes a long time ago. If you go on TCG Player right now and you look at the sales, these cards average anywhere between all the sites I look at, 300-400 sales a week for each of these types at $5 to $15 each. That's a whole lot of money. Still changing hands as people buy these cards. I'm sure some of those people are speculators, of course, but they're still being bought all the time. Now, what is the likelihood that Wizards of the Coast is going to do something superior to these anytime soon? That's the real clutch of the subject, right? Is it going to hold enough value for you to want to have to replace it? Well, of course not. You're not going to replace it. You may find it as an addition, as an add-on, as an aside, and say, hey, I've got this 6/6 Hall of Storm Giants. They came up with a 4/4 Cottage. I can add that in. They came up with this 3/3 whatever. I'm going to add that in. This one here has Menace. I'm going to add that in. You'll just be adding them on. And with the prices the way they are, the cards are so cheap right now for these particular mana-based cards. Even Bozuju Who Endures at $30, that's still a deal. That is still a very inexpensive card for the multitude of effects it gives you inside a deck. And let's face it, if you're playing casual, you just need one for your commander deck. You could rotate if you want to. You could trade in a couple of cards to defray the value and say it doesn't cost me as much to get it for a card that you are less likely to ever have to replace. So spending $30 on something you're going to have for 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 years, that's what we're talking about for value. That is value for dollars spent. That is not the latest creature that's big and scary and then rotates out or gets replaced by a bigger, greater, scarier creature, which again, could go side by side, but depends on how the builds go, depends on what's in fashion. Lands are always good. Lands always hold a greater value, and lands are the most expensive thing usually in the game of Magic. When you look at the Moxen, they act as land. When you look at all the amazing dual lands, the original OG lands, you're like, oh, super amazing value. They add to your deck's versatility by being able to allow you to get out what you want to do. And with the new lands we've seen, they are versatile. They are deadly in some cases, and they can make your deck just trigger and hum like it was built for destruction. I love the new lands. Now, getting 4 of each, sure, seems inexpensive. Not a bad proposition. 10, 20, 30, speculating, that is for every player to decide if you think they're going to be able to turn those around in a good time frame before something comes along that either depreciates them, destroys their value. But even then, if you bought 8 or 10, chances are you're going to use a lot of them over the years based on what decks you build, so you don't have to rotate cards. For cards like Bozuju Who Endures, getting 4 of those, if you can, 4 of that, 4 of Taknuma, which is like, what, $7, but bringing creatures back from your graveyard, the Descend mechanic, things like that have a real a real strong position for the future. Otawara the Soaring City, same deal. Offensive, defensive, and they're inexpensive. That's what gets me, is that these cards, comparatively speaking, and yes, I'm even talking fetch lands, shock lands, after you own them, usually players don't sell them all off. They hold on to them and they play with them. They hold on in case they build a new deck. That's why they always seem to hold and retain a certain value and why they bounce back more quickly. Even something like Horizon Canopy, the thing's been reprinted. It used to be like a $40, $50 card. Now it's like, what, $2 a card? And it still sells every day. Just because it got overprinted and killed in value doesn't mean players don't want it. That's what we're talking about. The years that will go by will affect the value of a card, but that doesn't affect the playability of the card. Again, value for dollars. Something like a nugget of something you should keep in your head when thinking about the value and the expense you want to have for your deck and the longevity of the card pool you're playing with. I just find a lot of the newer cards don't hold long term. They drop down to penny cards afterwards. But a good mana base is just something to be proud of. It allows you to build a whole multitude of different decks because the base is always there. That's what we're talking. When the base is there, anything else that comes along, you can build into it. And the best part is, when some of these cards rotate back into a format, let's say they've been gone for 5 years, and they get rotated back into standard, if you own the card, you can still play with it at a tournament. You didn't have to rebuy it, or if you do get them inside package, you can sell those ones off and actually recuperate some of the costs. So either way, the whole point is, if you're looking at mana and the mana base of your deck, you usually cannot go wrong buying them, even if they're at full price, because the long-term value of you playing with them, enjoying them, and not having to replace them far exceeds the initial cost of buying them. Thanks a lot for tuning in, guys. Thanks for hanging out with the Moxman here. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow for another video. Don't forget, bring a friend to Magic. And of course, guys, a big shout out and thank you to the fantastic patrons we have here supporting our channel each and every day, guys, because those patrons and YouTube membership members daily uploaded content. I'll see you guys soon. Have an awesome day. Welcome back to the Ramble Jamble, guys. Can you imagine if they'd done Drist? Here's Drist. Remember Drist? A 3/3 double strike. When it comes into play, you get the 4/1 Guinevere, and whenever a creature dies, you get the +1/+1 counters on Drist. He's 5 for a 3/3 double strike. Now imagine he was 4 for a 4/4 double strike and you got the token. There are cards more powerful than that now. Imagine a card like that existed at the time when Forgotten Realms came out. At least he'd be more than a 50-cent card. That's the problem with this stuff getting replaced. Mana, the mana base of Magic seems to hold up a lot better, doesn't it? Players always forget that. This stuff gets superseded all the time. I've seen it over the years, and they give you so many kill combos to deal with it, it's never really a threat. But land and land destruction, Wizards shies away from a lot of that now. They give you one type every few sets, but depending on the amount of cards you have to deal with, and the broad base we have for standard and other stuff right now, it's crazy, man. They're going to have to fix that at some point. But right now, I think land will hold. Yeah. I'll see you guys soon. We're here at the end. You made it to the Ramble Jamble. Put a boomstick in the comment section.